This is the Young Diplomats TV show on Universal TV Africa. It's a show that brings about enlightenment and also brings critical conversations to the forefront by our young leaders and our seasoned experts. Today, we're going to have conversations that are bordering on African history and achieving a paradigm shift. My name is Valentina Uchebu. We'll go on a short break, and when we come back, we'll dive into critical conversations. We'll be right back. Africa is rising. A new era of opportunity and responsibility is here. Join the Africa Young Diplomats project and equip yourself with knowledge and skills to shape Africa's narrative and assert its global influence. I'm Valentina Ofiepri Uchebu, CEO of the Africa Young Diplomats project and host of the Young Diplomats TV show. We'll take you on a journey of discovery, empowerment, and action. Be part of a movement that's changing the game. Gain knowledge, understand the facts, and take action to promote Africa's interests and make a difference. Join us. Together, let's make Africa great and secure a prosperous future for all through enlightenment. Watch the Young Diplomats TV show on Universal TV Africa. Empower yourself, empower Africa. You're welcome back to the show. My name is Valentina Uchebu, and with me I have my young leaders in the house. We have Essay, we have Esther, Derek, Stella, and Mufida. And on my right, we have our seasoned experts, our father of African history, Sir Emmanuel Ewodage. You're welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome to the show. So we're just going to jump right into it. And I would say with all these years of your teaching, your lecturing on African history, what are the main misconceptions that are prevalent?
Thank you. Well, the misconception derives from the fact that our history is more or less, oral. And because of that, the Europeans sold this misconception that Africa has no history, and that history actually began from, the time of their exploration in Africa. But that's not true. Africa has a robust history. We not only have oral history that were passed down from generation to generation, we had history in the forms of arts. Certain figurines depicted our history over time, whether it was hot war history, slave history, and all of that, governance history. They are all depicted in African culture, African arts, and all of that stuff. And then we have the history, the written history, not only by Europeans. We have history by Africans themselves who are retelling, the stories of Africa and its various empires and all of that stuff. So the white man came with that misconception that there was no habitable community, so to speak, in Africa. All this just to give that pretense or that excuse to be able to exploit the continent, And if we have to go back to the Egyptian history, you find that the pyramids, the hieroglyphics, and all of that, and tell the story of Africa also, However, there are contentions, whether it's the black man's history or history from other cultures and all of that stuff. But we know that it's the black man history. So we do have history. We have history written in our caves. We have history, the Timbuktu story, a lot of history written in the mosque in Timbuktu and all of that.
So how can Africans reclaim their narratives, compared to what the West is trying to, say on our behalf?
You reclaim your history. You reclaim your dignity by telling your own story. If we are still teaching our children in school that Mongo Park, for example, discovered River Niger, what do you expect? And River Niger has always been a trade route, from the Futajalon Mountains down to the Niger Delta and all of that. And then you come and say, Mongo Park discovered River Niger. Or you talk about David Livingstone and Stanley and all of that in Democratic Republic of Congo, So what we need to do is tell our own story. Project Africa for what Africa was, what Africa is now, and what Africa is aspiring to be tomorrow. So and naturally it's said that history is written from the angle of the victor, the one that from the winner's perspective, so to speak. So if the white man has that had that power over Africa, naturally you expect him to tell the story from his own perspective. The Arabs did the same thing when they raided the southeastern part of Africa, and today we see what they are doing in Egypt and all. Everyone trying to rewrite the history because they are the occupying people or culture in those parts of Africa. But as we liberate ourselves, there's that need to go back and start from the curriculum, start from the kindergarten, and begin to tell the story from the African perspective. Yes, that's the way you regain your dignity.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So I would like to ask the young leaders, let me ask Derek, what are you exposed to as African history? Is this something that was taught in school? Did they go to the core of African history was it just the slave trade, or what was it? What were you exposed to?
Thank you, Ma. You see, African history in schools is not really a subject that is really touched as it should be, especially in the secondary school level. Without history, there cannot be any future, to be honest. And I want to use Nigeria as a case study. I think earlier, history was not taught in secondary schools in Nigeria, which is, you can't even fathom it. How can history not be taught in secondary schools? Just like a few years ago that they now implemented it, that it should be taught in secondary schools. And I'm grateful that I experienced having history lessons in school. So in history, it really just taught us much about, not even Nigerian history, to be honest, but like as Africa as a whole, which I think is important too. But we should also dwell in our country's history. They don't touch too much on it, just the normal figures we know as Nnamdi Azikiwe and so on. But in African history, it makes me... history was one of my favorite subjects in school, to be honest. I learned so much about the Mali Empire, the Ghana Empire that we know so much about. And when I heard these things, I was like, wow, so Africa was this great. In the Mali Empire, there was the ruler known as Mansa Musa, who ruled around the 1300s. That was like before any of us or our grandparents were even alive. And he was the richest man in history. The Europeans who ruled over us, our ancestors were richer than all of them combined, to be honest. So that should show you the wealth in Africa. So schools should touch more about it. We did not go as deep as we should have gone into. Also, I learned about the roots, just like roots for slave trade, which happened. When slave trade happened, the Europeans, they used to bring so many things. Like the Europeans, they used to bring slaves to Africa, while us, we will give them our resources, our gold, our tin, our so many things that helped us thrive in exchange for... Sorry, they used to give us these things, and we used to give them slaves. Sorry. That's one thing that we also need to learn in Africa. Human capital. Human beings are the greatest... We are the greatest resources, to be honest, not our gold, all of that. And the African man is well capable, physically, spiritually, mentally. So I believe that, yes, history is taught well in secondary schools, but it should be more dealt on. Well, thank you.
So I'm just curious. These facts you have, were they taught in school or was it what you read?
Some of these facts were actually taught in school, but because of my love for history, I went deeper because I read so much, especially that Mansa Musa guy I talked about. The man was so rich. Nope. And who does not like money, to be honest? So, yeah, that's why I said it should be touched on more. They really just give you the surface level. But going deeper should let us know, how did he get those his riches? You understand? There are questions that somebody asked that I had to find out by myself. Yeah.
Because I'm sure he worked hard, and he did what he needed to do. Stella, as a student of history and diplomacy, what's your exposure to African history?
To me, African history is very broad, actually. It's very broad and very necessary for the growth of Africa, because you can't move forward without looking at the past. Some people do say that we should leave our past behind and move forward, but we should not forget that it's what happened in the past that makes our future. So African history is very broad, very beautiful history. If you read African history, you know that Africa was a great continent. Think like our guest speaker was saying once that, for example, look at Egypt. From the Bible, for example, you can see that before all these European countries like Britain, France, and all of them even grew, before they even became countries like Egypt, Ethiopia, they were already thriving, they were already big countries, thriving, and they're existing till today. So without history, we won't know all that. So Africa should embrace their history more. And even with our recent history, okay, for example, we have actually had really great leaders in Africa. For example, Queen Amina of Zazzau, the warrior queen, Queen Daranama of the Hausa states, and different African leaders, different great African leaders. So Africa has already become great before, although we are trying to reach that level again. But we can do it if we put our heart into it and try to study the past to know what they did and what they did wrong for us to land in this state today. And we should try to improve it to grow greater in the future.
So we're going to go on a break and then we'll be right back and we'll dive deeper into these conversations. Africa is rising. A new era of opportunity and responsibility is here. Join the Africa Young Diplomat project and equip yourself with knowledge and skills to shape Africa's narrative and assert its global influence. I'm Valentina Ofiepri Uchebu, CEO of the Africa Young Diplomat project and host of the Young Diplomat TV show. We'll take you on a journey of discovery, empowerment, and action. Be part of a movement that's changing the game. Gain knowledge, understand the facts, and take action to promote Africa's interests and make a difference. Join us. Together, let's make Africa great and secure a prosperous future for all through enlightenment. Watch the Young Diplomats TV show on Universal TV Africa. Empower yourself, empower Africa. Welcome back to the show. This is still the Young Diplomats TV show on Universal TV Africa, and I am still Valentina Uchebu, your host. My young leaders are here, and our seasoned expert is here. So we're just going to continue because it was really getting deeper at some point. Sir, there's this term that we hear nowadays, Afrofuturism. Can you give insight on what that is about and the relevance to African development?
Well, it's not really different from what has been, the Black Power thing, the Black and Proud thing, the Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff. So, but basically, for you to be futuristic, you have to have a base. You understand? You have to have a foundation. you have to know your past, you know, and it is that past you want to project the positives into the future. Basically, that's what it is. Yes. But again, it starts with going back to the beginning.
Yes.
You know, there was a study I did. I limited it to Nigeria in the sense that I looked at Nigeria pre-900 AD. And if you look at Nigeria, this geographic area that we now call, you know, Nigeria, pre-900 AD, who were the first settlers here? You'll be surprised that we have relationship with those in South Africa. The Bantus were here. It was from here the Bantus moved to South Africa. And they have kinship with the thieves. So they are actually related. The Eri people, who we now call the Igbos, they were amongst the first settlers here. But the real first settlers in this geographic, that we call, are the Jaws. Will you be surprised? You understand? If we understand our history this way, you'll be surprised that we can now project this into the Afro-futuristic life that we are talking about. As a young student, I visited my village, and they will tell you, you see this ward, it's you know, the way they partitioned villages, a ward. He said, don't go and have girlfriend there. Don't go and do this there. And I kept wondering why, you know. And I was told that the people of that place, is called Emadu, were not originally Isha in Ekpoma. Many of them came from where? From Niger State. You understand? What's that tribe now in Niger? The Nupe people. Because one of the heads, and Onoje, invited them to come and fight war for him. And they settled there. And you know, these wars run into years. Got married and chose not to live. So today, you see a lot of Asian people, and they don't know that they have Nupe blood. So if you understand your history this way, you will not fight.
Exactly. You know,
I was in Calabar, and I asked somebody, what's Calabar in Efik? What's the meaning of Calabar in Efik? And I knew why I was asking. And he said, no, Calabar is not in Efik. I think it's white people. I said, no, it's not white people. You know the people who gave you your name? They are from Taraba. Traders from Taraba. Who were trading in that place. And then you look at the Nok culture. What's the relationship between the Nok culture of Plateau State, Jos, and all of that stuff, and Ife? So you see how migration moves us. When you understand this, then you now have the basis of Afrofuturism in the sense that we are all one. There is no need for tribal wars. There's no need for, because you might actually be trying to kill somebody who is the same ancestor. So that's the essence. That's why we need to understand our history. Would you believe that in the 14th, 15th century, the Benin Empire used to send ambassador to Portugal? Yeah. The ambassador, the first kind of ambassador we have, they sent an ambassador to a prince from Benin Empire to go to Portugal and represent Benin Empire. When Benin Empire has street lights, all of Europe didn't have street lights. This is history. What kind of street light did they have? This was recorded by Portuguese. When they came, they discovered that as it gets dark, maybe that kind 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, somebody went round and was lighting fire. You used to have this kind of wooden with fire.
Yeah.
They use palm oil or oil. And the fire burns till morning. You talked about Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was about the richest person in the world. When Mansa Musa went to Mecca to perform the Hajj, his presence in Mecca devalued gold. Because gold was so much that gold became nothing. He lined the streets all through Sudan where he was passing. He was giving beggars in Saudi Arabia. He was giving beggars in Egypt gold. But you see, that story, to make it pragmatic, is you now discover that Mansa Musa of Mali Empire, today, where is Mali? What is Mali? Because we didn't learn from history that you don't take your wealth and give to another country. You invest your wealth. With all the troubles prevailing in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, have you seen Saudi Arabia give them free oil? Free gold? Has Egypt come to their aid? But Mansa Musa took all our wealth to those places.
Wow.
If we understood this, we will not take our crude and dash them. We will not take our commonwealth and store in Switzerland and build houses in London and all. That's what history teaches us. So history is not just storytelling. History is looking at your mistakes and not repeating them in the future. Looking at the positives and replicating them in the future. That's what Afrofuturism is.
So from what you have said, if we know our past, we'll be able to, correct right our wrongs and then know where we made mistakes. That's a very crucial, approach to not making the mistakes of our past again. So I want to ask, what are the implications of colonialism and slavery on African development? Now, why I'm taking this angle is there were things that happened in Africa that shaped, because the colonialism is also our past. It shaped certain, it gave Africa a trajectory into something that we couldn't control. So what do you think is the implication on African development?
Well, the first I would say arrested development in the sense that we were going somewhere. Okay? You had city-states. Of course, we had our own challenges, expansionism. People wanted to expand. Empires were being built, empires were falling, and all of that stuff. But we were going somewhere. We were beginning to talk about governance. Like I mentioned the Benin Empire, having to send an ambassador to Portugal, for example. And all of these things were happening in different countries. Ghana, the Ashanti Empire and all of that stuff. They were all going somewhere. Mali was going somewhere. You won't believe it. The university, let me call it what it is. The university, the oldest university is Timbuktu. You understand what I'm saying? So we were going somewhere. We had an army. We had currency to trade. We had governance. We were beginning to build infrastructure. I mentioned street lighting and all of that stuff. So arrested development is the result of when something comes like a big bang and disrupts. So slave trade was destructive. We had internal slave trade, you capture and then you use labor, but not in the magnitude that we saw it. Now, what people always look at is the transatlantic slave trade. They don't look at the the slave trade between the Arabs and Africa. That was also devastating in the sense that when they capture slaves to where we call the Middle East today, they castrate the men. That was not being done with the transatlantic slave trade. Now, the transatlantic slave trade, they needed these men to have relationships and have offspring so that they have more slaves. But that was not the same with the Arabs. The Arabs did not want integration. So they castrated the slaves. And
wow. So what, in essence, you don't have to wait for it to be taught in school. You can make your own investigations and your findings. Wow, this was a very, very, very enlightening episode. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this episode, but the conversation continues.